Good morning. My name is Allison Irwin. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm honored to be your worship leader today. I'm grateful to share this service with those of you here in person and those of you online. Welcome. If this is your first time here, welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Cincinnati. Occupying land that was once the sacred ancestral home of the Adena, Hopewell, Miamia, and Shawandasi peoples, we are a community committed to social justice and also committed to supporting the various ethical and spiritual journeys of our members. Our church is a place where you can bring your whole self, your full identity, your questioning mind, your expansive heart. You will find signs all over the building for various things that we hope will help you feel more comfortable here. These accommodations, such as gender-neutral restrooms, hearing assistance devices, are also listed on the back of your order of service. And if you have any questions, please let our ushers know. If you would like to know more about First Unitarian Church or our Unitarian Universalist faith, please contact us by emailing member-care@firstuu.com. During the service, please enjoy the flowers in front of me, donated today by the Fredrickson Joyner family in Atlanta. Mary Fredrickson says, "These are for our wonderful friends at First Church who we miss." And as we open our service today, Bev Baker will light our chalice, and I will share a reading by Bruce Southworth. For the gift of this day and for our community of spiritual nurture and compassion, we give thanks. We light this chalice as a symbol of our faith. May our many sparks meet and merge in communion of heart and soul. And now please rise in body or spirit and join in our vision song. The words will appear on your screen. Thank you. And now is the time to turn and greet our neighbors. If you're watching online, please say hello in the chat.
I don't know. Do you want to call people back? Okay. Good morning. My name is Bev Baker. I'm a longtime member of this church. There's been a slight change in the program. Late in the week, Fritz Casey-Leininger had to cancel due to illness, so I'm stepping in with a spiritual journey that I presented maybe 15 or 16 years ago. I dusted it off a little bit, but the reading this morning sort of relates to my journey. This is from the book, Beyond God the Father, by Mary Daly. It was printed in 1973 by our now defunct Beacon Press, who was very bold about printing things like the Pentagon Papers and Mary Daly's book. So this actually pertains to my spiritual journey. It's called the book is Beyond God the Father, and this is just an excerpt. Why indeed must God be a noun? Why not a verb, the most active and dynamic of all? Hasn't the naming of God as a noun been an act of murdering that dynamic verb? And isn't the verb infinitely more personal than a mere static noun? The anthropomorphic symbols of God may be intended to convey personality, but they fail to convey that God is being. Women who now are experiencing the shock of non-being and the surge of self-affirmation against this are inclined to perceive transcendence as the verb in which we participate, live, move, and have our being. And now, if you would please, let's rise and sing a rousing version of 110 in the Teal Book, and it is an amazing day. It's an amazing spring day, so let's feel it and sing it.
Another by Christian Robinson. I wonder, what if you had encountered another perspective, discovered another world, met another you? What might you do?
Just kidding. And now we'll dismiss our children to their classrooms. Please join, if you'd like, in singing "Go Now in Peace" 2 times through. Part of being a beloved community is sharing joys and concerns with each other. If you would like to share something with the congregation through our Circle of Friends email or in the newsletter, or if you'd like to talk with Resident Chaplain Mary Tarbell Green, please fill out the form on the back of your order of service. Place it in the offering basket when it is passed, or at the back of the sanctuary when you leave the service. We like to take time to contemplate our joys and concerns together. In the interest of time, we won't come forward this morning, but please take a moment of pause, reflection, meditation, or prayer while we hold space for the joys and sorrows that we've experienced since the last time we gathered together. The stones before me represent, our joys and sorrows, and the water represents the love of community. All of our individual joys and sorrows come together in one bowl of water to be symbolically shared and borne by us as a community. Today, I'd like to drop one stone for the joys that we share: the arrival of spring, the warmth of community, and the work people do for others, including the challenging but rewarding work of running a church. A second stone is for the sorrows in our world, those who have suffered from disaster, both man-made or natural, victims of injustice and oppression, and those who suffer from illness or grief. The next stone represents private joys and concerns we closely guard in our heart. And this final stone is for the brokenness of our world and the hope that we can be agents of wholeness by placing ourselves in that breach. And now, an update from the Stewardship Campaign co-chair, Scott Kelly.
Good morning. I'm Scott Kelly, and I am one of the chairs for our Canvassing Stewardship update. Good news is that we have about half of our pledges already turned in. The bad news is that still means we got half to go. The goal is to try to get this generally done in March, although we're not like the government. It's not a hard and fast deadline. We will extend this as needed in order to get all the pledges. There are 2 ways that you can do this, and we're going to be emphasizing the second way a little bit more going forward. One is to go onto our website. There is a Give tab. You click on the Give tab. It will take you to a page where you can make your pledge. The other one is much more low tech, and I think there are some advantages in just being able to fill out a form and turn it in. So we have paper forms where you can write things down, and then that will get put into our system. In addition to that, we will have letters going out to anybody who has not already made a pledge yet. As a reminder, the form will be included in there. And I will somewhat apologize ahead of time. I used our database for the canvassing, which included the name of the person who made the pledge last time. In several households, there are often 2 heads of households that are members of the church. And if they only put one name on the pledge form, that is from last year, that will be the one name that appears on the letter and the one name that appears when you got your emails. So I apologize. We tried to find some of those, but not all of those were caught. So I apologize in advance if you are a 2-member household and you only see one name and you wonder, why is my spouse not there? It's not that we don't care about them. It's not that we've forgotten about them. It's just the way I organize the system. So Beth and I will be sitting at a table outside the sanctuary shortly after the service. I have letters, I have forms. If you have not already pledged and you just want to pick it up, you can come stop at the table. If you just want to be friendly and chat with us, you can do that. But if you don't, we will send out these letters with the form, and we ask hopefully for a prompt reply. We will also begin starting to make phone calls, just that extra reminder, personal reminder that we need to get this in so that the budget and planning committee. It takes a lot of work to run the church. Part of this is the planning process. Part of this is about the aspirations we have as a church, which include our developmental ministry, but also getting more office support. And this pledging process helps us understand what can we do for those other areas that are really, really needed at this point. So thank you so much if you've already made your pledge, and I look forward to seeing some paperwork or emails from you in the future. Thanks.
Giving, as you've just heard, to First Church is easy. In March, we don't have a designated Share the Plate recipient, as we encourage you to make your pledge for fiscal year 23-24. To give, you have multiple options. You can text the word GIVE to 513-717-7373. If you have access to our Breeze member system, you can click Give Now, or visit www.firstuu.com and click the word Give. If you prefer to write a check, please mail it to 536 Linton Street, Cincinnati, Ohio, 45219, with the check made out to First Unitarian Church of Cincinnati. If this is your first time here, please allow the plate to pass you by. Your presence is gift enough.
Well, I said I took this out of my files and dusted it off, and I'm still dusting it off. But I'm glad to be here with you this morning because after so many years in this church, I love looking out at the congregation. And I can still picture people that aren't with us anymore and where they sat, like the Luttons here and the Halps here and the Bosians there. And if you go way back with me, Julie Underwood way back in the back, who could not hear but refused to move up. This is before hearing devices, hearing-assisted devices. But at any rate, I'm glad to be with you. So, my spiritual journey goes back pretty far, and I was told when I was a toddler, my first coherent spoken sentence was, "I can do it myself." So it's no wonder I forged my own path, which led me from my Presbyterian upbringing to this church. But to paraphrase a Walt Whitman poem, everything I saw or did as a child became a part of me. So on my spiritual journey, I still carry with me the deep and lasting influences of memories of wonderful singing, biblical teachings, loving religious education teachers and ministers, and haunting spaces of worship, and the many, many caring people of my Christian upbringing. Fortunately, I enjoyed going to church as I was a child because my family was a go-to-church every Sunday family, and foot dragging on Sunday morning was not tolerated. But my first memories of flitting around a Sunday school room singing, "Jesus wants me for a sunbeam," hooked me. I loved the music from the earliest "Jesus Loves Me" to resounding hymns like "Holy, Holy, Holy," or "Be Thou My Vision," as we sang today, particularly when they were sung by hundreds of worshipers. And also beautiful singing, heartfelt songs such as Let Us Break Bread Together or Lord, I Want to Be a Christian in My Heart, and harmony around campfires at teen retreats. All of this fed my soul. I also loved the Bible stories. Characters such as Abraham, Isaac, Ruth, Esther, Moses, and their biblical robes captured my imagination. Their strength and faith lifted me before I even learned of the literary term archetype. As a fifth grader, I did chafe a bit at having to memorize a catechism that was required for joining the church, but I loved my silver Celtic cross that I was given when I joined. Later, I was an ardent reader of the Bible. I loved the comfort, joy, and poetry of the Psalms, the teachings of the parables, and recording of age-old wisdom and folly that I might use to guide my steps. Perhaps a lot of the interest in my religious teachings was due to the dedication of my Sunday school teachers, ministers, and teen program advisors. How fortunate I was to have so many people lovingly take an interest in my spiritual development and well-being. The church buildings of my life also had made deep impressions. Colorful stained glass windows, the authority of raised pulpits, the smooth attention, demanding hardness of wooden pews, the mystery of baptismal fonts, and the beautiful wood in many of the churches I attended all filled my senses. So, the architecture may have varied from church to church, but there was always a sense of space made holy. For when I entered, even as a child, I felt called upon to a deeper, calmer place within myself. Well, so much for the memories of childhood. Like many of you here, I entered the period of doubt in my teen years. I began to see inconsistencies in Bible passages. Biblical heroes became flawed, and most disturbing of all, the 1960s civil rights movement of my teen years was beginning to reveal that the love and attention I had received in church was reserved for white children only. People of color were not welcome to move into my neighborhood, let alone attend my church on Sunday morning. More doubts began to center around that troubling holy time of year. You guessed it, Easter. Somewhere in my teenage, hormone-driven, party-loving, cyclical rhythm body became a visceral awareness developed that Easter had more to do with a full moon before Easter than stories about the betrayal crucifixion, and resurrection of Jesus. In a college humanities course titled The Tragic Hero, the unraveling of my childhood faith was complete upon reading one line in an essay about whether or not there could be a Christian tragedy. In this essay, Jesus was compared to the Egyptian god Osiris, and the story of Jesus' resurrection was compared to pre-Christian, earth-based spring fertility rituals. And here is that perception-altering sentence about Jesus. The bold outlines of his story are similar to the Osiris narrative. For this, some people call him the last and most triumphant of the Asia Minor vegetation deities. Further comparisons between ancient Dionysian rituals and Christian rituals of community, which I recently began to suspect as having pagan overtones, sealed my departure from Christianity. And then I was propelled into the vast unknown limbo of agnosticism. Not only did I reject the Christian concept of Jesus the Savior, but I doubted the existence of God as well. During this period of agnosticism, I married my college sweetheart, who was Jewish. So I began looking for a denomination and church which could embrace agnosticism, Judaism, and Christianity. And I learned of Unitarianism and this church. So I started my exploration with this church, and then I looked no further. This was the place for me. But long, I did not dwell in the limbo of agnosticism. I was certain about what I didn't believe and didn't think much about what I did believe. I was content with the intellectual sermons of the late 60s and early 70s, happy to sing choral music in the choir here for the sake of its beauty and mental challenge, happy to sing old Christian tunes with ponderous you words that I could believe, even though they did not engage my emotions. Even though I was in spiritual hibernation, I loved this congregation's dedication to civic causes. I loved the intellectual liveliness and friendliness of the members, the governance, the beauty of the sanctuary, and the RE program for my children, and the potluck dinners. So now I was with church friends who were, as the mission statement says, supporting me on my spiritual path. In the late 70s, during the women's liberation movement, the women's group at First Church began exploring feminist theology. Each month, we would read and discuss essays by feminist theologians, such as Valerie Saving, Mary Daly, and Rosemary Radford Ruthfer, and I soon realized that my struggle was not with God, but a patriarchal image of God, the Father and Son. I hadn't abandoned God, but rather a patriarchal image. So during this time, I found the wounded girl child within me, and I began to embrace an image of a supreme goddess, of course, and also embrace the goddess within me. Even went to a costume party dressed as a goddess, Aphrodite to be precise. No humility here. But this was more than a costume to me. I was reclaiming some inner strength that had been diminished, if not totally extinguished by patriarchy. Eventually, I developed a method of reconciling my patriarchal Christian path with what I'd learned from the feminist teachings by using tools of language. Since, like many of you, I was still a part of a large, extended Christian family, I learned to reach beyond the language of patriarchy and to see that language as a metaphor for greater truths. I call this process of reimagining and rewording, translating to wholeness. So, where am I now on my journey? I believe in a God that I can see in human love and compassion in the natural world. I believe there's a healing force in the universe, and that perhaps Jesus, who certainly was a great moral leader and teacher, perhaps he was a person who understood that force. I believe in the 7 principles of Unitarian Universalism and how whatever they might morph into. And I believe in the people in this church, the leaders, the caregivers, the teachers, the learners, the ministers, those who've gone before us, whose lives have inspired us, and those who will step forward in future years. So, I will keep traveling on my spiritual journey, and where else but in this church could I have had such a wonderful journey for the last 54 years. Thank you.
I have not been here 55 years. Thank you, Bev, for inviting me to share my spiritual journey and for being my partner this morning. During lockdown, Reverend Connie hosted a Zoom session called Unpacking Your Spiritual Baggage, and I really enjoyed those conversations, and I know a lot of you attended. I was born into an obscure fundamentalist Christian sect of the Wesleyan tradition. As a result, I was raised without a television, and this has given me an interesting and unique perspective, as well as an appetite for reading that I wouldn't trade for anything. I was also raised to comply with a full complement of gendered dress taboos that I've come to understand aren't uniquely Christian at all, but more emblematic of traditional peoples throughout the world. I learned that these taboos were deeply intertwined with sexism intrinsic to the culture in which I was raised. From an early age, I rejected sexism. I refused to believe that this is what God would have wanted for us. This was probably because of my dad. He was a preacher, but not a very popular one. He always got assigned to tiny churches that didn't come anywhere close to paying the bills, and this was okay. He was a math teacher by day. He also knew how to knit and cook and braid my hair. I remember long conversations with him, poring over 1 Corinthians chapter 11. He would work hard to prove to me that sexism isn't inherent in the teachings of Christ. And you know, I think he's right. But that didn't make the church a safe place for me. I think that being relegated to the backwaters of the denomination saved me in some key ways. I rarely had the opportunity to form close friendships or date within the church community. In addition, adhering to all the religious taboos forced me firmly into the outcasts, weirdos, and geeks category at school. I know how it feels to be othered, and it turns out this can be very useful knowledge. I like to say that I am not conflict adverse, probably because of this part of my history. My parents were mavericks within their sect. They firmly believed in public education, they refused to censor our reading, and they made sure to keep a good library of sex education books on hand. While the TV was firmly banned, they were early adopters of computer technology. They had a reel-to-reel projector that they would show us films checked out from the library, and they bought a VCR when they became commercially available in 1986. My parents' decision to buy a VCR was momentous. There was a bitter church split concerning the new technology, and the sect was splintered. The Wesleyan theology that I had been exposed to very much relied on the call in Philippians 2:12 to work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, which to me is the UU fourth principle. I took this very seriously. As I got older, I saw more clearly that my own salvation would be different from that of my parents. I was also trained to listen to the witness of the Spirit. This was something that I was afraid I would lose as I forged my own path. I'm happy to report that this is not the case. Unitarian Universalists call this the experience of that transcending mystery and wonder affirmed in all cultures, which moves us to a renewal of the spirit and openness to the forces which create and uphold life. It is one of our 6 sources. I graduated from high school in a small town in Nebraska in 1994. I moved to Cincinnati 1 week later. It was sort of random. Cincinnati had never been in my plans. I got an invitation to live here for the summer, and I knew that I needed out of Nebraska and my parents' home just as quickly as possible. I immediately got to work finding my tribe and discerning my own values. I enrolled in classes at UC and particularly enjoyed studying anthropology. I described this time in my life as hauling all of my ideological furniture out of the house and carefully choosing which items I would allow back in. One of the first concepts that I let go of entirely was expectations for the afterlife. Although I am often confronted with my family members' fear for my eternal soul, I cannot engage. How can I truly and honestly build my own ethos with such a penalty or a reward looming? I eventually found an ideological and community home in punk rock. Punk rock values anarchy, freedom of the people, destruction of tradition, and the idea that there is a basic truth that exists beneath our societal constraints. The punk value of do-it-yourself also appealed to me. I really enjoy working hard alongside others and outside the economic structure. I call this recreational cooperation. I also hate locked, unused spaces, which this church all too often is. Have you heard the old joke, Unitarians are just atheists with kids? I started church shopping when I was pregnant with Cordelia. I had 3 reasons for seeking out a church home. I wanted my children to have the vocabulary to discuss spiritual matters. I wanted a framework for volunteerism. And I wanted a chance for intergenerational socialization. Church is one of the very few places in our society where unrelated people from all age groups come together. And we should be more cognizant of this. Especially with the geographic dispersion of families, the only older folks my children will ever have a chance to really get to know are right here in this room. I am an anarchist, but I am not an atheist. I believe in the power of chaos. I believe that chaos is the natural state of things and order is an illusion. Chaos is ultimately the thing that keeps the bad guys from being in control. I think that human beings are meat tractors whose primary function is to create meaning from the cacophony of all that is. To me, this is what Genesis chapter 1, verse 2 is talking about. We are the Spirit of God moving on the face of the deep. This is science. This is mathematics. This is music and literature. This is art. This is also poetry and philosophy. Ultimately, I do believe in God, mainly because I feel nurtured in this life and along my path. I really like the Jewish and Islamic taboo against naming or describing God, though. I think it's useless and possibly even dangerous to slap a human face on such a concept. While I'm usually rooting for the atheist in an argument, my least favorite argument for atheism is, if there is a loving God, why would there be this horrible, painful thing in the world? Stephen Fry, who I love, talks about a parasite that lives in human eyeballs as his reason for atheism. To me, this is a silly argument. Without pain, there is no story, no beautiful struggle. All that we really leave behind us when we die is a good story, if we're lucky, and hopefully some gems of meaning that we've managed to secrete. I chose Unitarian Universalism because the principles are top-notch and the sources are pretty solid. I'll take principles over dogma any day, and ours are pretty amazing, start to finish. If you're wondering, I'm totally on board with adding on an 8th principle, which I would explain as the obligation to work to dismantle systems of oppression wherever they are encountered. I want to thank each of you for listening to my spiritual journey, and I invite you to be part of this conversation as we continue to learn together and search for what is true.
Wow. Again, yes, for Bev, for Faith. Thank you for sharing your stories. I'm struck by how diverse we all truly are, right? the journeys that each of us is on, the background that we all bring. It's something I love about this church, among many other things, but thank you for sharing. I'm excited to learn everyone else's story if I haven't yet. Pretty beautiful thing. Now, please rise and embody your spirit. Turn to page or hymn number 1020 in your Till hymnal. The words will also appear on your screen. Wo yo yo. Please join me in reading together the words that will appear on your screen as we extinguish our chalice. As Bev extinguishes our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Please, if you're present in the sanctuary, wait until after the announcement slides are finished to hear an update from Barbara Dickerson on the ministerial search. And if you are a visitor and would like to learn more about our congregation, please join our Getting to Know You small group session in the Fisher Room at 11:15.